So to start with, you'll want your white fabric, and we want either 2 pieces of 31-inch long by 2.5 inches wide, or 1 piece that's 60 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. So you can either cut 1 long piece, or you can do your sash in 2 halves, depending on how much yardage you have and the shape of your fabric that you're starting with. Fabric and the yellow fabric, you'll want the same lengths, but you want them to be 3.5 inches wide rather than 2 inches wide, or 2.5 inches wide. And yes, Carrie, the ribbon, you're gonna cut the same lengths, but your widths should already be set by the width of your ribbon. If you're doing ribbon, I would just suggest doing 1 long length, since it comes in yards anyway, rather than trying to do 2 pieces. And you'll also want, if your white fabric is very sheer, like mine is quite see-through, you'll also want to cut a piece of interfacing the same size as your white piece. And that's just gonna help so our letters don't, you don't see the seam from the back of the sash showing through your letters.
There's a great little history lesson going on in the chat right now, and I love it. So if there's no yellow fabric or ribbon available, green is absolutely a great color to use, because those are the colors that were commonly found in the UK, which was the movement that started a bit earlier than the US.
They had a number of, I don't know, today we might call it merch, you know, pins and buttons and handkerchiefs. And I mean, you know, just using those colors really beautifully to, so you could show your allegiance, but still be an elegant lady.
Well, and even the sashes, there's quite a bit of variation in the sashes that exist. So some of them will use all purple, some of them will use all gold. Some of them will use different widths, different fonts. Like, they're all very, you know, made in groups in your community. So you might make them together and you would have different variations depending on where you were. But it's the colors that are really important, and they all have, okay. So has everyone got all their pieces cut out? We're all good. Okay. So the next thing you're gonna do, I personally prefer to interface my white fabric before I do my tracing of my letters, because it gives it a little more body, and then the fabric isn't always trying to run away from you while you're trying to trace your letters. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that next. So we'll go ahead and iron your interfacing on if you're using it. Like so. And then the next step is to do your lettering. So if you're using 1 long piece, you want to fold it in half, and you're only going to use the front. So if you take the fold and put it on your right shoulder, you're only going to letter down the front half of it. I can give you some measurements for that. So once you found your center point, you want to measure down the front of it about 5.5 or 6 inches. You might want to go a little bit farther if you're, you know, taller than, I'm only 5 foot tall, so that measurement's based on me. But if you're a taller person, you may want to go like 6.5 or 7 inches to start with. And then you're going to measure in from either side your seam allowances to help you center your letters, which is about 3/4 of an inch on either side, and that should give you a nice big centered lettering. And then in the printout, you have a couple of choices for your lettering, which were pretty common. So Votes for Women and the National Women's Party. I will say when I scanned this, it auto-adjusted the sizing. So if you want to trace this, you can, but it's going to end up being roughly 50% smaller than my lettering on here. So I might recommend spacing out your lettering and then freehanding it using the font as a guide. You can use this as is, but you may have, it won't cover your body quite the same way. So you'll end up with your slogan about this big instead of going all the way down your body. But again, they weren't all, you know, they're not all uniform. It doesn't, you don't have to use this exact lettering. You can use cursive, you can use narrower prints, whatever you want to use. They're all acceptable. Don't hesitate if anyone has questions, put them in the chat or speak up, just let me know. The right, I've always seen them on the right shoulder. So they might show as my left in the video, but that's my right shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah, different programs and different computers will flip video so that you'll see yourself as you expect, which makes tutorials like this a challenge.
Yeah, definitely it's fine, but I've predominantly seen photos where it's hung from the right.
Sandy had some great advice about ways to do tracing. Like at a window, for example. I've been looking into some other options, and I like to use a Pyrex baking dish with my phone underneath. I just turn on the phone flashlight.
Oh, nice.
Sign up through the Pyrex baking dish, and then I can sort of move my project along it.
So yeah, I don't know if you can see, but that's my lettering box there, and then I'm just gonna freehand today.
What are you using to mark that, Sandy?
This is a friction pen, Frixion. They're the best pens in the universe. They are heat erasable, so you can mark on it and not worry about it, and just when you press it, it goes away, and they're mwah. I love it. It's really cold, like if you leave it in the car in the winter, but it also washes out normally, so if you throw it in the wash, then you never have to worry about the mark showing again. But it's really handy for stuff like this where you want a really clear mark, so you're not having to squint for where your pencil marks are, or worry whether your pencil marks will actually come out of your fabric later. And there's a few different ways to fill in your letters. So the example I did, I used this speedball like screen printing paint and a brush. Can also use a Sharpie or a fabric specific marker. Really anything that's not gonna just wash out or bleed on you later is perfectly acceptable. So I'm gonna try and use this chunky marker and see how that goes. Oh, well, that's not working very well, but
Do you have any favorite fabric markers, Sandy?
Not really. There aren't that many available.
Yeah.
I really liked like there were some brush tips you could get for a while that were really fantastic, but I've not been able to find them anymore. Like Sharpie.
Yeah, they called them, I remember they called them stained, and they were supposed to be for fabric, but yeah.
Yeah, and they were amazing, and then they just decided they didn't want to make them anymore, I guess. I don't know. But
they had great colors.
If you can find them. Yeah.
I've been
Yeah, just-
experimenting with some markers that I got from a company called Dharma Trading Company. They're a big source for any kind of decoration on fabric. And my favorite so far are tea juice. It's kind of
Oh,
a
yeah,
weird
those
name.
are really good
Tea juice.
ones.
Yeah. They come
Yeah.
in
I need to
fine,
use
medium, or really, really big. And they are juicy. They've got lots of good ink. So that's a good choice.
Yeah. This is like a tulip fabric marker that's huge, like poster.
Oh, wow.
size. And it's nice for really big things, but I think I used it on a banner, so it doesn't have much juice left in it. But yeah, these Marvy, this is like a Marvy.
Oh yeah, they're a good brand.
Yeah, those are pretty good. But this is blue. I couldn't find my black one. Maybe I'll do a special blue one today.
Yeah. I've also used a brand called Fabric Mate. I think it's another, there's so many of these markers and pens are made in Japan. I'm not quite sure why. That seems to be where the coolest markers are made. But they have a really good deep color and a brush tip that's really easy to use.
So this is the longest process of this is so obviously votes for women. There are a couple of different women's parties that are represented. So the National Women's Party is a big one. You also see the National Women's Suffrage Party, which they were a little more radical politically and kind of were responsible for messing some stuff up and, you know, being loud. And then I've also seen, well, you've seen Eleanor's Sash that I made words, which is another one, but it's not a very common one, at least not in America. But we just really liked it because of the sentiment. So I've made some sashes with that as well. It translates pretty well to modern life, I think. All right, well, while everyone is doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and, because I was able to cut long pieces out of my purple and yellow, but I had to cut short pieces out of my white fabric. I'm gonna go ahead and sew my two pieces together, so I'm ready for the next step while you guys are finishing up there. Oh, and Eleanor's popped into chat to say that she has even seen sashes with the name of the town or the area that you were representing when you were out doing your activism and your marches and things.
I'm going to share a link to a blog post that was just published recently by a museum professional who actually pulled items for the Vote documentary that's coming out next week, and she shared a number of the resources she used, including a bunch of online exhibits. I don't know about you, but I just love seeing photographs of suffragists through the years, and just, I don't know, it's just great to see all those crowds of women from all over working for the vote. So check those out. I loved exploring all the links that she included there.
Okay, so the next step is to take your pieces. You can, if you're working with the shorter pieces, you can do half at a time, or you can sew your two pieces together to make a long one and do it all at once. It's however you want. So you're going to take your white piece and your yellow piece, and you're going to line your yellow piece up, right sides together to the top of your lettering. So I've got my letters like this, and then I'm going to take my yellow piece and line it up along the top edge. And then you're just going to stitch down it, 1/4 inch seam allowances. So when you've done your seam, so this is the back, when you press your seam allowance, instead of pressing it open, you know, so the white goes down and the yellow, you want to press everything up. You'll have a shadow behind your letters, and it doesn't look very nice.
She does not the top.
So it's just a way to make it look a little bit neater. So this is like a pro tip, like pressing is the best way to get your sewing to look professional, is pressing it and pressing it properly. So this is like a little inside tip so that you end up with a really beautiful, crisp, neat sash at the end of every carries using ribbon. So you might want to use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, or you can even butt your 2 ribbons up against each other and do a very, very small zigzag stitch to join them up.
I think the head should be down here.
You should have neatly pressed piece, and then you're going to do the same thing with your purple piece on the bottom of your white. Just right sides together, line up your edges, and run your 1/4 inch seam. So the next bit is pretty easy. You're going to take your sash and you're going to fold it so that, again, right sides together. So your letters will be inside and your seam allowance will be outside. And you're going to fold your purple and your yellow together to make a tube. So you'll have a little sash tube. And then again, you're going to sew all the way down it using your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So there we have a tube. In theory, you could just make all of your pieces the same size and then finish hem all the edges, but this is a lot faster way to get a nice, neat finish without having to do a billion yards of hems. Once you have your seam done, this seam we're actually going to press open so that it lays nice and flat. So you press it like that. And then once that's pressed, we're going to flip it inside out. So to flip, this is usually wide enough you can kind of do it by hand, but I prefer to use like a big old safety pin just because I feel like it's a little easier to push it through. So I'll just take a safety pin and kind of open this up and put my pin through like that and close it up. And then I'm just going to push it to the inside like this. But once the pin is in there, you'll be able to feel it and you'll have something hard to push against. If you have like a tube turner, you can use that as well. Or you can just use your hands if you've got small hands. I wouldn't recommend it if you've got very large hands, but you know, go find a child to help, I guess. All right, now this is the best part of turning anything out. Woo! Every time, you'll never not get a thrill from that. So now you should have something that looks like this. And then you're going to want to press it again. I like to press it from the right side so I can see, make sure the white part is centered. So even if your stitch line wasn't, you know, perfectly straight, this is where you can kind of cheat it and just make it look as pretty as possible. Really tell, I'll hold this really close up, but you can see where I put interfacing and where I didn't put interfacing. So that's why we do that, just to give it a little more opacity in the front. Like I don't mind the line showing through at the back. It's not going to be very noticeable, but you want those words to be really legible. And then the next step, you can skip this step. I like it just because it keeps everything nice and neat and tidy. And that's just to top stitch all the way through your sash in the matching colors. So I'll thread my machine with yellow and then I'll just stitch right along the edge here in yellow. and do the same thing in the purple. And that'll just help keep it from sliding around. You won't have to be constantly ironing it. Every time you wash it, it will keep everything nice and stable. Yes, I did right on the edge towards the white. You could do the other edge as well. It will do the same thing. But I like to do it closer to the white because it helps keep the words nice and straight. Also, I used fairly, the technical term is squidgy fabrics for my yellow and my purple. So my lines they're not very straight. But when it's on and you're moving, no one will notice, so don't worry. So once everyone's got all of their top stitching and everything done, there's just 2 steps left. 2 very little steps and you're all finished. We're gonna make a little dart at the shoulder so that it will lay nicely and not stick out. So there's that step, and then finishing the ends, which I usually just pink mine, but you can do a normal hem as well and turn it up, or serge the edges, or whatever you really want to do. I'm just gonna go ahead and pink mine for now.
Yeah, that gets you this non-fraying edge.
All that pinking shears do is cut it on a 90-degree angle to keep from fraying. Is you could actually just cut your whole sash like this, like at a 90-degree angle, and that should more or less do the same thing as the pinking shears. You just might want to put it on first and figure out which side you want to be the longer side when you pin it on. So I feel like most people ready to do the shoulder dart. Are we about there? If you have 2 separate, does anyone have 2 separate halves? Is anyone working in 2 halves, or does everyone have one whole piece? One. Okay. So if you have 2 separate pieces, you would just line them up together. If you have one, you're going to fold it in half so that, the center, your letters are. That's the big thing. If you have 2 pieces, you want to make sure you're seeing the top of your letters, not the bottom letters. But if you have a whole one, it's a lot easier. So you're just going to fold it in half. I like to put it like this so the yellow is up because that's your top. And then you're going to draw in from the fold. I don't know if you guys can see that. 1 inch at the top and about 1/4 inch at the bottom. And then draw a line, and you're just going to stitch on that line, and it's going to make a little dart so that your seam will actually sit against your shoulder instead of sticking out and giving you like a wing. And then what I'm going to do is kind of press this flat like this and take the iron to it. So you should have Sash. You can see how it lays against your shoulder a lot better with that dart in there. And I usually just leave mine all in there, and I might like hand tack that down a little bit so it stays smooth, but you can trim it off if you want, but then you have another raw edge that you have to finish somehow. So I just leave mine all in there. When it's on, you don't really notice the bulk of it at all. So, and then that's it. You've made a sash. That's all there is. And to wear it, you just put a little pin at the bottom and go about your business. The nice thing about pinning it is then it's adjustable. You know, so if you have a smaller person or a larger person, you can pin it so it hangs comfortably on whoever. I usually pin mine so it overlaps a little bit, kind of like that.
Yeah, with a pin you can adjust the angles so that it lays just how you like it.
Thank you to both Sandy and Eleanor and all the members of the Historical Costume Society who have been joining us in our suffrage programming for this year. And again, thank you to the Indiana Humanities for supporting this series.